Hello, everybody. My name is Silvia. I'm doing my PhD here in the University of Valladolid about zoonotic diseases in rodents. And this presentation is specifically about vectors. Zoonoses is something that we have learned in the couple of years, sadly, because of coronavirus. So we know that the zoonotic disease is an infectious disease that animals can transmit to humans. And this is a map when you can see in yellowish colors the hotspots when the risk of emerging zoonotic diseases is increasing and very high. So the next pandemic can come from one of these points. As you can see, you can find high populated areas like Europe, both coast of North America and Central America, and tropical forest mainly. In South America, Africa, or both, like in India or Southeastern Asia. When we see this map, we can think, okay, those places are too far from me. I'm not going to go there in contact with any strange pathogen, but if I go there, I'm not going to touch any bat or any rat or any of the droppings. But when we forgot is that when we think about diseases, we normally think about direct contact with an infected animal or an infected food or water, but we forget about vectors. Small arthropods, they can transmit the diseases from this contaminated food or water or infected animal to us without noticing. So this is a real problem about diseases. The other big problem is that we think that diseases is something about doctors and health system, hospitals, maybe veterinarians, treatments, drugs, medicines, symptoms, but that's not really true because pathogens don't live alone. They live in a real ecosystem. So we need the ecology of zoonoses, determining the elements involved in the circulation and transmission of these pathogens to really understand what are we talking about. And that's the framework of my work. So I'm trying to determine and study a host community. In this case, are for small mammals on your left. And we already know that at least they can harbor these three zoonotic bacteria. At least there are more pathogens and more zoonoses. We have determined the population groups at high risk, especially hunters, farmers, and shelters. But there's an important knowledge gap about vectors. So we have developed an investigation focusing on that group of animals. This is our study area in the middle of the Castilla y León region when we are actually now. We can see a picture of a typical landscape of this region. It's a very intensified agricultural area. And we need to trap these animals alive. So we use Sherman traps baited with some food, and in this case carrot, because we need to get those animals alive to the laboratory, comb their hair, and get the ectoparasites. And we have found that they mainly have one species of tick that is shared with all the hosts. So is possibly this tick change one host to another different host from the same or different species, and especially important in the shrews. And we found 3 different kind of species of fleas, especially abundant in the voles and the wood mouse, because half of the animals have at least one flea. But what is most important, we have already found co-infections. That means that a number of the hosts harbor at least 2 different species of fleas, or 1 flea and 1 species of tick. What is this so important? This is important because, as we have told you before, we are talking about ecology of zoonoses. That means that we need to understand the relationships between all the elements. And in this case, we can have the typical infected animal where some ectoparasites are feeding on it and get infected. This is the systemic infection. But we can also find that the host is negative, and it's the ectoparasite, the vector, which is positive. And it can infect not only the host, but also other ectoparasites that are feeding on the same animal at the same time, even if the host is not infected yet. And then those positive vectors move to another animal, another host, to feed again. And in this case, it's a rodent, but accidentally we can be us. Why vectors are so important and very concerning? Because the transmission risk of vector-borne diseases is increasing. These are the perspectives for the future. And why? Because of these four causes. In first case, the climate change. Some places are going to get warmer winters, milder summers, and changes in the precipitation patterns. That means that the distribution of some vectors is going to change. Maybe some places, especially north in the hemisphere, north hemisphere, and southern in the other hemisphere, are going to get hotspots for the emergence of zoonotic diseases. The second problem is the loss of biodiversity. The extinction of species of some ecosystems are obliging these vectors to gather in the remaining species, favoring the transmission of diseases and these vectors between hosts. And the other problem is the increase of human-adapted species, like especially rats and domestic mice, that are moving those diseases from the nature to the inside of our houses. So that's really a problem. The third cause is human mobility. International travel is something very common today, not only international traveling of people, but also animals, also pets, also goods, food. So we are moving those species, but also we are moving some vectors that are on them. And we normally don't notice that they are there, but they can be positive to any disease, and we are moving around those vectors. And the fourth cause is land use change. We are creating habitat fragmentation that is creating favorable conditions for vector transmission. These edge areas are areas where species interact more frequently and also can do it their vectors. And lastly, the abandon on agricultural lands and reforestation are also getting create favorable conditions for the population growth of those vectors. So we know that the vectors are out there. They are out, and we know it, but we really need to know them better before the next epidemic, because vectors are a key element in the transmission, circulation, and spillover of zoonoses worldwide. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you all the institutions to make this investigation possible.